Hey guys, welcome back to A Better Choice Homestead, where today I'm going to be sharing with you my Kamut or Khorasan wheat bread recipe that I'm going to be doing in the oven versus in my bread machine. I did show this using the bread machine, and I can post a link for that video up here. But for those who don't have a bread machine, or if you just like working with your hands in the kitchen, then I'm going to show you how to do it in the oven. This is a really simple recipe. I actually made this last week, but I was still playing around with the recipe a little bit, and I'm not going to be doing that recipe, but I'll tell you the difference. I used a little extra honey in the dough of the bread, and it came out like Hawaiian roll bread. It was absolutely amazing, but a little bit sweet. So I'm gonna do the original modification that I did to this recipe. But if you do like a sweeter bread or you like Hawaiian rolls, then during the dough process, just add another 1/4 cup of honey and it's going to come out fabulous. It's absolutely delicious. Now, this is Khorasan wheat, and Khorasan is one of the 7 ancient grains, and it has not been extensively hybridized over thousands and thousands of years. So even people with gluten sensitivity usually won't have a problem eating bread or bread products that use Khorasan wheat. Khorasan and Kamut are essentially the same things. Kamut is the designer trademark name for the wheat, but they are essentially the same. This is a larger kernel wheat berry, and it has a nutty profile and slightly sweet profile. It is absolutely delicious. So we're gonna get started by grinding down some wheat berries. We're gonna need a total of about 4 cups. So I'm gonna do a full quart-sized jar in my Wonder Mill. And we're gonna do that on the medium bread setting here and make some beautiful flour. So we just need to take the lid off, get the machine turned on. I'm doing this backwards here. With the Wonder Mill, you need to turn the machine on before you pour in your wheat berries or whatever it is you're gonna be grinding, and it does get a little bit loud. With our whole wheat flour ground down, we're going to be getting all the benefits from the bran and the germ, as well as the endosperm. And the endosperm is what you get after refining the flour. So that's what your typical flour in the grocery store, already milled in bags, is. It's just the endosperm. But when you mill freshly ground flour, you're getting all the nutrients of that wheat berry, and it is so incredibly healthy for you, especially for your gut. All right, so we are going to be using a Danish dough whisk because that makes it really easy to get all of these ingredients combined. We're starting with 1.5 cups of pretty warm water, about 110 degrees. That's gonna help wake up the yeast, which I actually just pulled out of my freezer about 20 minutes ago. I'm gonna go in with 1 tablespoon of the yeast. I'm going to add 1/4 cup of honey, and that is going to lend to a nice flavor profile because the Khorasan or Kamut wheat is already slightly sweet. So just this 1/4 cup of honey just makes it absolutely amazing. But if you do want that extra sweet bread, think French toast, then you would add another 1/2 cup of honey once we move on to the second step. So right now what we're doing is we're making a sponge. Making a sponge when working with whole wheat is very helpful. It helps really hydrate the flour, which again is the whole wheat flour, right? There's a whole lot more stuff in there than just the endosperm. So it helps hydrate it, which lends to a moister, softer, just more flavorful crumb inside the bread. So start with a sponge, meaning we are going to ferment this for about 30 minutes, just letting everything marry together and soak up as the yeast is fed by this honey and starts to wake up and do its thing. So I'm going to mix these together, and then we're going to add in some flour. We're going to start with 3½ cups of flour, and then we will add up to about ½ cup more when we make the dough. So we're starting with the sponge, and then we're going to make the dough. All right, now 3½ cups of this beautiful, freshly milled flour. It's had just a couple minutes to rest, so it's not hot from the mill. And freshly milled flour is nice and fluffy for you, so you don't have to weigh your measurements, or you shouldn't have to weigh your measurements. So here's 1. 2. That's 3, and then I just need a half more. And we have plenty left in here for the dough step. And now I'm just gonna use the Danish dough whisk to get this well combined. Oh, it smells so good already. Just that honey with the aroma of this wheat berry is amazing. I might go in with just a little bit more water. So every time you make bread, your ratios might need to change just a little bit. It depends on the temperature in your house as well as the humidity, and this is looking pretty dry to me. So I'm going to add just a little bit more water. It should be a very, very shaggy type dough, and this is pretty solid. Well, let me see. Yeah, I'm going to add just a tiny bit more water and hope I don't regret that. So just a tiny bit more. Get that worked in. And then we're going to let this sit for 30 minutes. Oh yeah, this feels better. This feels wet now. And you want to let this rest somewhere where it can go through its first proofing stage. So if you have a warm spot in your house, maybe on top of your refrigerator, or I've even turned on my Excalibur dehydrator in the past, which is the 9 tray. I've taken all the trays out, turned it on to about 95 degrees to get it heated up, then turned it off, put it in with the door closed. That has worked for me in the past. But today, I was actually, because it's just been so cold outside, my kitchen is like 67, 68 degrees, and it does like about a 90-degree proofing temp when you're making bread. So my range does have a warming drawer on the bottom. So I Googled the model number of this range, and I was searching for the temperature, because if I'm going to use the drawer, my options are high and low, and I didn't know what those temperatures were. So I pulled up the online manual, because this was here when I purchased the house. And lo and behold, this range actually has a proof setting on the oven itself. So I'm going to try that today. I haven't used it before. Hopefully it's going to come out okay. We're going to let it go for about 30 minutes until it is doubled in size. I'm just going to cover this bowl so that the dough doesn't dry out in the proofing oven. It will also help hold the heat from the warm water in there, which will also help it proof. So a 30-minute rest for the sponge, and then we will come back and make the actual dough just by adding some extra ingredients. This is just gonna go right into my oven set to proof. I have a rapid proof setting and a standard proof setting, and I'm using the standard proof setting. And it does feel just the slightest bit toasty in there, so I think that's gonna work out well. I'll see you back here in 30 minutes. I just checked my oven, and I'm so glad I did. It's only been 25 minutes, but we have definitely doubled in size, and our sponge is nice and bubbly. So we know that that yeast is very, very happy. I'm gonna save this plastic for our second rise. Let me give you a close-up of what this should look like when we are ready to move on to the dough portion. And I will put a recipe card up here. Can you see how doubled that is? And you can just see all the little air pockets from the yeast working through that fermentation process. This looks fantastic. So we are going to just punch down this dough, and then we're gonna add our dough ingredients. And do you see how sticky that is? That's normal. This is a wet dough. All right, so to this, I am gonna be adding some melted butter, just 1 tablespoon of melted butter, and some salt. We're gonna use 1 teaspoon of salt. You can use whatever kind of salt you have and like. We're going to be using clean hands for the rest of the mixing here. So we're going to mix that in and just get that butter well incorporated in here. Oh, this smells so good. Oh, there's my timer for the proofing, but we were a step ahead of that. All right, so with that mixed, next we are going to add in some vital wheat gluten. So I mentioned that Khorasan whole wheat does not have the same kind of gluten that today's traditional flours have. It's a much weaker gluten, and it's one of the reasons why it doesn't affect people with gluten sensitivity as much as traditional store-bought flours do. And that means that it's not going to get a huge rise, the rise that you're used to getting from a bread dough. So I add vital wheat gluten in here, which does help it get to be a taller loaf. So 1 tablespoon of vital wheat gluten. One tablespoon of dry milk powder. So a tablespoon of milk powder, 1 teaspoon of sugar. I'm just going to use granulated sugar. It's what I have right here in the kitchen. So now we're going to get this mixed in. And then we're going to add in up to 1/2 cup more flour. A little bit at a time, so maybe a 1/4 cup at a time, because you don't want to make your dough too dry. It's not going to taste good if it's too dry. So I'm going to measure out 1/2 cup, and if we need any for the kneading process, which I don't think we will because I'm using my pastry mat, then that would be pulled from this amount as well. So no more than 1/2 cup here. So I'm gonna go real easy because this dough, it just feels a little dry to me based on weather and humidity today. So I'm just gonna get that mixed in. We'll see how much of it it'll take. I'm gonna take it out of the bowl. And I'm just gonna keep adding it in here and mixing it in. I might not do more than that, we'll see. If you are familiar with baking bread from scratch, then you know that your flour and water ratios can change just based on, you know, the environment in your kitchen or your kitchen environment. And if you are new to making bread by hand, then it's going to take you a few loaves to figure out what the dough should feel like, should look like. And Khorasan is still relatively new to me. I've been working with it for a handful of months now, and I just love it. All right, so it did take that flour pretty well. See, it's usually a lot stickier than this, so I'm not going to add any more flour. We're done with the flour. And now we are going to knead this for 5 to 7 minutes until it's really nice and smooth and elastic. Now, every other time I have made this recipe, I've told you I've been, practicing with it, making sure that I can get consistent results, and I have been. And so that's why I'm excited to share it with you. But today is different. Usually it is sticking to my hands still at this point, and I have to knead and knead and knead for it to become less tacky and sticky. So I'm toying with the idea of adding just a little bit more liquid in here, more water, because it feels fine. I just know it's much drier than it normally is, even though I have already made a recipe card for this, and I have been following that recipe card religiously week after week just to make sure that this is going to give consistent results. And it's, for once, not. And even though it's no longer tacky and sticky, you still need to knead it for 5 to 7 minutes, because you need to develop that gluten or you're not going to get a rise in the oven, and you will likely get big holes in the whatever crumb you do end up with. Hey Siri, set a 5-minute timer. I'm doing 5 because I've already been kneading this for a couple of minutes. And so we're just gonna go for 5 more minutes. And I'm just turning the dough in. So if you think of it as the face of a clock, I'm turning 12 o'clock down to 6 o'clock and then pushing it back out with my hands, giving it a quarter of a turn, and then the same thing. If this bread doesn't come out today, that will just be the epitome of Murphy's Law right there. The only thing I did different last week was added that second quarter cup of honey to this dough step. So, but that shouldn't, all the times before it, I followed this recipe. So we're just gonna go with it. If I can't get it to look smooth, if it still looks like it's cracking everywhere, then I'll probably add just a little bit more water. You definitely want the bread from Kamut flour or Khorasan wheat to be very well hydrated. It's what makes the crumb so incredibly soft. It's already flavorful, but you want a really, really soft crumb. You would not even know that you are eating a whole wheat bread. Your kids wouldn't know, nobody would know. It is absolutely delicious. And the bread from last week where I added the second quarter cup of honey, that was amazing. That got gobbled up. That was so good. It was so good just as toast, and it was really good as French toast, just as a snack. And it's so healthy for you. All right, I am going to add some more moisture to this dough, which is unfortunate because I wanted this to be perfect, just as written in the recipe, but we can't always help what the weather does. All right, let's see if we can get this to take a little bit more water, up to maybe 25 mLs. I think it's going to be a much happier dough with some more water in it. And that was barely any that I added. But we're going to work that all in before I add just a little bit more. And there's my 5-minute timer. So I'm going to give this a couple more minutes with kneading. And I think I'm good there with the water. That's about 25 mLs total because I filled it to the 50 mark and I used half of that. I need a way to suction down my pastry mat here. It likes to move with the tension from the dough. This feels like a much happier dough, much smoother and softer. So I'm going to keep the recipe as written with 1.5 cups of water. But just know that you may need to add less flour or a little more water, just depending on what your kitchen is like the day you make this. I still have my oven on the proof setting because this is going to go back in now. It's going to go into a lightly greased bowl covered for about 60 minutes. 60 to 90 is what I wrote, just until it doubles in size. So don't overproof it. Keep an eye on it, but 60 should be about right, depending on where you're proofing it, how warm it is. And that looks good. Just going to use a little drizzle of olive oil up the sides. So like 1 turn. And then I'm going to place the dough in upside down, get the top part coated, make sure the sides are coated well, and then flip it. I'm going to get that plastic cover back on here, and we're going to let it do its second proof. I'm using the plastic just because I don't want it to dry out in the oven. I do not know what temp standard proofing is, but hopefully it's about 90 degrees. One hour, and we have doubled in size. So the bread is behaving, or the dough is behaving very well. And now we're going to turn it out. And again, I'm going to use my pastry mat here. We're going to punch it down. It's going to go through one more rise, but this rise is going to happen in the bread pan. And I have thoroughly sprayed my bread pan. You can use oil or the spray of your choice. So just punching this down, we want to make sure that we get rid of any big air bubbles in there, or you're going to end up with big holes in your crumb. And then I'm just going to roll this nice and tight. Oh, this dough feels really, really good. All right, so we are too big, right? For our pan, our dough is larger than our pan. So I'm going to stretch this out a little bit and get it kind of even. And then I'm going to fold it in half and just roll it that way. And we're going to tuck the two ends under so that they are not ends. And we're going to roll this up again nice and tight. And tuck our ends under. And now we're going to put that into our bread pan, and we're going to let it rise for about 30 to 45 minutes. We want it to double. We want it to fill the pan. I'm going to put it back in my proofing oven, but I'm going to take that out at the 30-minute mark and let it sit on the counter for the last 15 minutes because we need to get the oven screaming hot at 400 degrees. We're not going to bake it at 400 degrees, but that's where we want to start because we want the oven nice and hot so the bread has the opportunity to rise or to hold its rise after this proofing period. And if the oven isn't hot enough, it can collapse. So we're going to put that in there. I'll come back in 30 minutes to take it out, and then we'll come back in 45 minutes with a 400-degree oven and a loaf of bread dough ready to bake. See you then. I took the proofed bread out of the oven 15 minutes ago and then turned that onto 400 degrees. Now I'm going to put this in, and this did fall just a little bit when I took it out of the oven. So that's why you want your environment really hot so that you don't lose any height on the bread. This is still going to be just fine. I'm going to put that in here on the middle rack. And I'm going to drop my temperature. Now I'm going to drop it to, it's supposed to be 350, but my oven runs a little bit hot. So I think I'm going to go for 335. And we're going to bake that for 25 to 35 minutes. We're looking for a golden crust on top and on the bottom and an internal temperature of about 200 degrees. So I'm gonna start checking that at the 25-minute mark, but we are so close to having some amazing, warm, freshly milled whole wheat bread that is incredibly delicious. In my oven at the reduced temperature, that took about 40 minutes to get to 200 degrees. I think we're at about 202 degrees, which is perfect. You just want to be at least 200. And that way your crumb won't be gummy. It'll be nice, airy, light. So let me just double check that. 200 and 201, 202. So perfect. Now you want to get your bread out of the loaf pan as soon as it comes out of the oven so it stops cooking. And that's why you sprayed it really, really well. So it should just lift right out. And can you see the golden color on the bottom? That's another sign that your bread is ready. So I'm going to put it here on a cooling rack, and I'm going to put some butter over the top of it just to make sure that the crust stays softer. So I just got a big stick of butter here that I cut 1 tablespoon off of earlier to make the bread. So I'm just going to use that to butter the top. And that's just going to help make this soft crust instead of hard crusted bread. Now, if you are new to making bread, then you want to cool your bread completely before you cut into it, or you can ruin the texture of it. I know it's really hard to wait because this bread, in fact, your entire house will smell absolutely amazing at this point. And sometimes I do cut into it prematurely, but trust me when I tell you that the wait is worth it. So we're gonna let this cool down before we cut into it. So I'll be back in maybe 30 minutes or so, and we'll slice this up and take a look. Still a little bit warm to the touch, but perfectly fine to slice now. So let's I'm gonna cut a couple slices because the end pieces, they're my favorite. They can be a little bit crunchy though. Look at this crumb. And let me tell you, that is soft as soft can be. The crumb looks beautiful. Ugh, this is just marvelous bread. I'm gonna cut one more piece. We're gonna get that buttered and then we're going to give it a try. All right, let's do one more slice. I don't want a really thick piece because it's just about dinner time. But again, look at that crumb. And this bread is just so soft. I'm gonna put just a little bit of butter, or maybe a lot of bit of butter, because butter is good. Look at that crumb. I don't know, I just wanna make sure you can see just how soft that is. It's so good. And I know that my loaf shaping was not amazing today. A little distracted trying to get all the plants in the ground so we can start growing. We've had that turn in the weather. So I've been in and out, but not bad, not bad. We have a beautiful loaf of bread here. Perfect for sandwiches, perfect for toast, French toast, breakfast sandwiches, you name it, and a nice buttered piece of bread. Now the crust is my favorite. This is hands down the best whole wheat bread in the entire world, in my opinion. It does not feel or taste like you are eating whole wheat bread. But you are 100% getting all of the nutritional value from whole wheat bread. And even better, if you mill your own wheat berries, you're getting all of those nutrients, because within 24 hours of milling flour, the nutrients are gone. So good. It smells good. I'm gonna take this side piece of crust right here because the crust gets a little bit hard in my bread pan and I love it. So good. If you don't like it that way, you can butter the whole loaf when it comes out of the oven to soften it up. But I love that little bit of crunchy chew. Now the top piece we did butter, so we did soften that up a little bit. It's so, 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 so good. The 1 cup of honey, or the 1/4 cup of honey in this recipe is the perfect amount of sweetness, in my opinion, for an everyday bread. But go ahead and bump that up to 1/2 cup, splitting it between the sponge and the dough if you want a super sweet bread like a Hawaiian roll. It is so, so good. And while homemade bread, especially if made in the oven, is a very hands-on process and it can take a while, it is so well worth it. Like I said, I was getting a whole bunch of things done in between the proofing, rising, and all of that. This is an amazing go-to bread that anybody would love. Love it. It's perfect. So there you have it. There is my recipe for homemade, freshly milled Khorasan wheat bread, also known as Kamut, to fuel your body, keep it healthy, and nourish the soul, because it is absolutely delicious. Thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Tasty Tuesday. My name is Kelly, you're at A Better Choice Homestead, and I do hope you'll come back and visit again soon.